My name is Amber Adams Progar, and I think I've met a good number of you. Who in here have I met? Just raise a hand. It's a decent number. Okay. So in case you don't know, I am coming up on my 1-year anniversary in Washington, which is kind of exciting. I'm thinking about throwing a party. We'll see if that turns out or not, but I'll make sure to invite you if I do. But you'll have to come to Pullman in order to come. So, some of you that know my history already, where am I originally from? Wisconsin, right? And everybody's kind of giggling. I don't understand why, but okay. So I started in Wisconsin, and then I went to Oklahoma State, and as some of you already know, I really wanted to do animal behavior, and so I looked at animal behavior in lizards, right, and got my master's degree. Some of you that didn't know that tidbit are smiling like, really, what the heck is going on? Are we getting a lizard talk today? No, I did lizards for my master's, okay? Oh, you're interested in lizards? We can talk later, okay. And then I decided, lizards are fun. But I don't like the fact that their tails fall off, and I'm not really all that interested anymore. I want to go back to dairy, because I grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, right? So, I go to Texas A&M, get back into dairy cattle behavior and welfare. And that's where we're kind of going through today, right? I did a postdoc in Minnesota, and now I'm here in lovely Washington, and I gotta be honest, there was some big things I noticed right away. And some of that is what we're going to talk about today. There are some big differences, in case you weren't aware, of how I feel the public agriculture, animal production in particular, in the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota area, compared to how it's viewed here. And taking my personal experience, I want to share some of that with you today, give you some insight. And then also share some recent survey data and some other research that's come out saying, what does the public want? I mean, how many of you here, raise your hand if you know what the public wants? Okay. Oh, I thought he was raising his hand. I was like, Andrew, please, enlighten us all. But it's hard, right? What does the public want? Okay. And like I said, I think there's some particular things here on the West Coast that are more challenging than they are in some other areas. So let's try to go through some of that. Here's a little bit of an outline. So just to kind of give you an idea of where we're headed, we're going to start out with talking about the top 10 trends that the California Dairy Council said just either the end of last year, beginning of this year. So everything presented today is from either the end of this year, end of last year, or beginning of this year. So it's pretty fresh. But we're going to talk about the Dairy Council in California saying these are the top 10 trends that we see that are going to impact the dairy industry in the next 2 years. Okay, so we're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about some of the public perceptions, in particular of animal welfare. How many of you here think, yeah, the public's pretty worried about animal welfare? They are, and we have some data to show that. We're going to talk about, as the title suggested, how do you go about engaging a community? Now, I know there's a lot of concerns about it, right? You have to protect yourself. You don't want to, make yourself too vulnerable, right? Because there could be consequences. But yet, you still want to have that opportunity to engage. And if you don't, what happens, right? If you don't engage with your community, what are the consequences of that? That's another thing we'll address. And then I'm hoping that we may have enough time to actually get a little bit of discussion or a little bit. I have questions, right? Because I haven't even been here a year yet, and I'm still standing here like, whoa, I've got this culture shock that happened. I'm trying to figure out what we can do, how WSU Extension, how the Conservation District can help you engage with the community and not make yourself too vulnerable, okay? So these trends, I thought it was pretty exciting. I thought it was pretty interesting when I came across this. They came up with their 10, right? Their 10 top trends. They said these are going to be crucial in the next 1 to 2 years, okay? Some of these, most of them, probably don't surprise you, okay? But real quickly, they're saying, dairy foods, there's a lot of research coming out that dairy products could help kind of mitigate or help with the prevention of diabetes, okay? Now, what does that mean? Well, obviously dairy foods are going to get some good publicity, right? They're going to get some good feedback. If this research shows that consuming dairy products can help with the prevention of diabetes, I mean, that's a good impact on the dairy industry. So dairy fat used to be a bad, bad villain, right? It was not looked upon favorably, right? People were saying, milk fat, it's awful, it helps with, heart disease, obesity, or different things, like this, just stay away from milk fat, okay? Well, now, research is saying, you know what? Some of these saturated fatty acids, which are included in this dairy fat, they may actually, look at that, be neutral or positive to heart health. So now all of a sudden, it's kind of like when eggs are really bad for you too, right? That's kind of a roller coaster. Eggs are awful, right? And then, well, eggs aren't too bad. They might actually be helpful. Same thing that the dairy industry is going through, right? Now they're saying, okay, well, research is saying that this dairy fat could actually, it may not cause any issues, but furthermore, it may actually help your heart. That would be great, right? Protein. Protein continues to be, protein's talked about a lot in nutrition, right? People are very interested in how, protein in your diet, where do you get your protein sources from? What they're expecting is this isn't going to change, and that demand for good quality protein is going to keep increasing, okay? I highlighted this one because this feeds into our discussion a little bit today. They're saying that consumers are demanding more personalization, okay, in everything from their shopping to their dining, okay? So what does that mean? Well, they suggest, the Dairy Council in California says social media may be one of those ways that dairy farmers, dairy producers can address this personalization, okay? And this, once again, like I said, it feeds into what we're talking about. It's that disconnect. How many of you think that there's a disconnect between the general public, I saw some hands go up already, between the general public and the dairy producer? I think a lot of us would agree that there's a big disconnect, okay? We're going to talk about that later. California is saying we think social media could be a tool to help reach those people, okay? You hear millennials talked about a lot, right? Millennials are having a big impact on these types of things because social media has become, that's one of their main forms of communication. That's how they get some of their, that's how they get some of their news usually, right? Right? They're not sitting around usually watching. Sometimes they will, but there's a lot of, they see something first on Twitter or Facebook or those type of sources. So, California is saying we're aware of this. We're looking at, can we use these types of things, these types of tools to try to help get that personalization. Probiotics, which a lot of time yogurt gets kind of talked about with probiotics, right? Probiotics, there's a big mass of literature coming out. There's a lot of people interested in adding probiotics to your diet, helps with digestion, it can help with your immune system, and then, here's one that I saw too, it can improve your mood, is what some research is suggesting. So, if you're ever getting cranky, have some yogurt, and maybe that'll make you feel better. What about, so it talks about obesity. Now, we've seen this as the obesity, especially childhood obesity, has been, that has been on the forefront of topics for quite a while, right? We've seen a lot in the news. We've seen, Michelle Obama's push, right, for childhood obesity. So they're expecting that's not going to go away. I mean, that's still a top priority. It's going to be a top priority for the next couple years. And one of the things is talking about these healthy eating patterns. So, what role do those dairy products have in those healthy eating patterns for children? And how does that help address obesity? Consumers, they have this interest, and they're going to continue to have this interest, it's predicted, that they're going to want those foods that have those, niche names on them, like low calorie, low fat, low sodium, no trans fat, gluten-free, GMO-free, right? There's all of these labels, right? And they're expecting that consumer interest in these types of products, that's not going away. So if it's predicted that that's not a fad per se that is going to be gone, next month. It'll be around. Low-fat dairy products, there's some research. I thought this was interesting. There's also a lot of research going on about Alzheimer's, right? And dementia and, aging and how that affects your brain. So one of the things, there's some research that says that low-fat dairy products can actually help decrease the effects of aging on your brain. Now, if more research is done and it shows that that's true, do you think that's going to be beneficial to the dairy industry? Probably, right? There's a lot of changes in the healthcare, and the council brought this up too. When you thought about healthcare previously, you thought a lot about just the doctor's office, right? That was where you got your healthcare. Hospitals, clinics, things like that. You're seeing this being expanded to drugstores, retail stores. You can get a vaccination at Walgreens now, right? You can go to CVS and get a vaccination. Or you can actually, you can go and actually see like a doctor now at some of these places and get like a quick visit type thing. So healthcare is starting to expand out and about, right? And they acknowledged, they said there are some definite challenges to milk consumption within these next couple years, okay? And they highlighted 4, actually. And they said, besides price, right? Because price, that's one thing that it's out of your control for the most part, right? There's not a lot you can do about it. They said these are the things that we're going to focus on, okay? Environment. We all know, and that's not a surprise, right? None of these will probably surprise you, but environment, they said, is going to be one of our key things. Animal care, I highlighted that because that's part of what we'll talk about later. Okay, so animal care, they put that as number 2, as this is going to be one of our biggest challenges in the next couple years. GMOs, okay, that has really started to really gain energy, right, over the last, however many years. And they're saying that next couple years, that's still going to be one of our biggest challenges, is how to handle this GMO battle, right? And diet claims. I was so disappointed. Okay, let me preface by saying, I don't typically watch Dr. Oz, but when I do, I was so upset because Dr. Oz said something on his show. They were talking about diets and healthy eating, and Dr. Oz had mentioned something about, weight management and eliminating dairy completely, right? And I had this, this gut-wrenching, I wish I could just whisper into Dr. Oz's or slap him. I try to not get violent, but when I do, no. But there's all these, their diet claims are everywhere. You see these you see things like the Mayo Clinic diet. You see, I had a relative that did a cabbage diet, right? Where you just ate cabbage soup for however many days. But these are things that aren't going away. People, it's that drive. People, there's weight management, losing weight and wanting to be fit and be in shape. And as long as someone tells them, like Dr. Oz tells them, this is what you have to do in order to have a healthy diet, That's what they're going to listen to, right? This, they're saying, is still going to be a big issue. And one key thing here is they are talking about transparency. Ugh. Right when I bring that word up, I get the chills because I feel the chill coming from the crowd, right? Transparency. We're going to talk about that later. It's scary, okay? And it's, especially in the world that we're in today, I mean, it's scary. And so we'll talk about that, but they said transparency is important to build trust and meet the consumer's needs, okay? So they're saying we're going to try to focus on this transparency to help address these things. Now, we'll see how that goes. We'll see, I'm not sure what they have in mind, how they're going to increase their transparency, but we'll see how that works out. How does the public perceive animal welfare? Or if we go back, here they're talking about animal care. I would kind of use that a little interchangeably, right? So good animal care, you usually have good animal welfare. So the public, how does the public perceive? We already said there's a lot of misconceptions. Can we all agree that there's probably quite a few misconceptions of the public? I'm still in my boundary. Okay. Can we all agree that there's probably some misconceptions about animal welfare or animal care on dairies than what the public perceives? I would say, yeah, there's probably at least a couple. We can all agree at least a couple. So we need to start. I don't know if any of you have seen this slide of mine before, but I always have to start with this because there is so much that people misunderstand about animal welfare versus animal rights, okay? And all of you in here, if you're all, dairy producers, all dairy producers, you can firmly say that I believe in animal welfare, okay? And you're not causing any problems. You should be. You should be a firm believer in animal welfare, okay? So what is this difference? If you believe in animal welfare, you're agreeing that yes, okay, there is a responsibility that takes care of an animal's well-being. So you're going to, have some housing, you're going to have management, the handling of them, and disease prevention. You're going to do this to the best of your ability as animal welfare, okay? Whereas a lot of people get confused, right? Because they think animal welfare is the same thing as animal rights, and it's not. If you're talking about animal rights, you're saying, well, animals should have the same rights as humans, okay? And that's where, and so then, because they have those same rights, we as humans can't use those animals for our benefit. Okay, does that make sense? So when you talk about animal rights groups, this is what they're going for, right? But what is a way that they can target, producers, animal producers, is they can say you don't hear them talking about animal rights most of the time. You hear, so when there's lawsuits that come out, you hear them talk about the animal welfare. These things aren't being met. They're not doing a good job at doing these things. But what is their motive? Is the rights. Does that make sense? Okay. I always like to use these pictures because, here, I mean, it's a true photo of people, there are people that believe that, right? And I think a lot of you know that animals should have, and in Europe, that's where it's going to come first. There's already predictions that there's going to be laws and regulations that are trying to be pushed through that would push this agenda of saying, that, yeah, even down to your pets, okay, that they have the same rights as you. Now, what happens then is that they predict it'll hit Europe, then where is it going to go? Canada, and then where is it coming? Here. So I just think it's good to be on the forefront of kind of knowing what to expect and what's going on. So we talk about these public views. there's a Consumers Reports. They did a survey, okay? And like I said, all this stuff is very recent. And 80% of the people that did the survey said that they want good living conditions for animals raised for food, okay? But I highlighted good because how we perceive good and how other people perceive good could be different, right? Good is not very definitive. So then the question is, and that's where I feel like that's where my research comes in a lot, is I try to look at what is considered good. Because from a producer standpoint, you want to do a good job, right? But there are limitations. And sometimes the public, well, most of the time, the public doesn't see those limitations. They don't know that story, right? So they see what they think is good, and they don't understand that that's not even feasible, that you can't do that, and there's reasons why you can't do that. But they don't know that. West Coast, so I pulled this one because it targeted the West Coast, right? And they did a survey on consumers, and 49% completely agreed, right? So it was either slightly agree, different variants of agreeing, but they completely agreed. So almost half said that they're more concerned about animal welfare and how production animals are treated and how they're raised for food. They're more concerned now than they were 5 years ago. Okay, so almost 50% in the last 5 years have seen this increase in, all of a sudden now they're paying more attention, right? In another survey, and this one was pretty interesting, they had about 1,000 people that took the survey, so a decent size. And about, well, 2/3, 69% of them said that they actually prioritize. So animal welfare is one of their big factors when they make decisions on what to buy. Okay? That 69%, that's a pretty high number, is looking at how are these animals treated as one of their top priorities. Okay? Now, that brings up all these things about, so there's different, like certified humane, we've seen some of these labels, there's a lot of different labeling that's coming out, different stamps of approval, different, right? Actually, this one, some of these you can't read, but there's a lot, like there's grass-fed, natural, putting the country of origin on it, right? Putting all natural, putting no added hormones, 100% vegetarian feed, antibiotic free, naturally raised. There's a lot of labels, right? And the question then is, are consumers paying attention to these labels, and which ones do they pay more attention to? Now, I would say that this would lead us, I would say that this one would start to kind of lead us towards, okay, they're paying attention to animal welfare, right? But this study, 51% said that the claim, specifically this claim, humanely raised, was very important or important, okay? So they had different levels, again, that they could choose. So they chose important or very important in causing them to believe that a food's ethically produced, okay? So just having that label on there, 51% say, that tells me that animal was raised ethically, okay? That's food for thought. Just something to think about. But when you look at, we talked about all these labels, right? Here's a survey that was done by the farm animal, it was a farm animal welfare survey. And they looked at, if you could rank the importance of these different labels. And these are all labels that we see quite a bit, right? So you've got organic, humanely raised, natural, antibiotic free, okay? And so they asked people, they said, out of these 4 labels, which one to you is most important? And on a scale, so 100% would be absolutely necessary, okay? Humanely raised got the top score at 69%, okay? So humanely raised was considered more important than organic, natural, or even antibiotic-free, which I thought was very interesting because we all know, right, about the antibiotic-free debate. So humanely raised came first, and then antibiotic-free, and then natural and organic. So people are paying attention, and they want, they've got their wants. They know what they want. They want to see these labels that ensures them animals are being raised humanely. Okay. Now, this begs the question of how does the public get their information? Are they coming out to your dairies and asking you if these animals were raised humanely? No. Are they talking to well-educated representatives of the dairy industry that are, like I said, well-educated? Wink, wink. No, they're not coming to me and asking. They're getting their information from things like TV and, well, the internet, right? That's where they're getting a lot of their information, is their media. So then it poses the question of how is your media portraying, animal production, or furthermore, dairy production? Because if that's the way the public's getting their information, and you're not being portrayed in a very good light, what does that do? It's not good, right? And then there's also animal welfare people have a lot of emotions attached to it, right? And that's where we can run into some problems, where there's a fine line between what the science shows us, when we talk about animal welfare, and what people feel, okay? So how can you go about helping with these public perceptions, right? We know that there's some misconceptions out there. We feel like, yeah, there needs to be some education. There needs, how do we do this? Let's go back to these perceptions, okay? Now, we can see, either of these farms on any given day, right? They're very common. But the general public, when you ask them to envision a dairy farm, okay, this is what they're envisioning, okay? So what happens when all of a sudden they see a dairy farm and they see this instead, right? They automatically have this knee-jerk reaction of, this isn't what I pictured. This isn't what I perceived a dairy farm to look like, okay? Now, some dairies do look like this, but some dairies look like this, right? So how can you help how can you help the public realize, what are the benefits of raising cattle like this? What are the benefits of this? There's disadvantages too, right? So sharing that type of information, sharing that story of this is why we do things, trying to explain things. There's actually, there's an article, and maybe some of you read it, in Progressive Dairyman, but there was a presentation by Charlie Arnott from the Center for Food Integrity, and in his presentation, he had 3 steps to engage with consumers. I would also say your community, because these fit for your community also. He said the first step is to just listen, right? It's really hard. I know it's hard, right? Because if you sit there and listen, and there's a lot of things being said that are wrong, you completely disagree with, but yet you listen, right? You listen to what they have to say, and why are you doing that? You're trying to gauge, where is this person coming from, right? It's really interesting, because once you have a better idea of how, where they're coming from, what their experience is, it can help you try to help teach them, okay? What's the hardest part is to not become defensive, right? I have that challenge too. Someone challenges my research, and my automatic reaction is I want to defensive, like, no, you're wrong, but where does that get me in the long run? Not very far. Okay, so then asking them questions. So you listened to them, you took it all in, now you can ask them questions. And you can ask about some of their background, ask about their food purchasing decisions, right? Ask them, well, how do you, now, some of you have heard this story already, but just in November, we were at, the dairy industry meeting, and there was an individual that came up that was, Karen remembers this, and there's an individual that came up that was not part of the dairy producer group, right? He was, a person from the general public, and he had very strong opinions on, organic and grass-fed beef and all of these things, and he had a lot of misconceptions. And our dairy producer, actually Karen's husband in particular, was very good about not being defensive and asking questions. And what we found out is that this particular gentleman, he makes all his food buying decisions from a newsletter that his co-op sends him. Okay? They tell him which foods to eat, and that's how he decides what to buy. I found that very interesting. Now, would we have found out that information? Would we have gotten that insight if we automatically said, no, you're wrong? No. He wouldn't have offered anything. We wouldn't have learned anything, except we would have walked away mad, right? So it's hard, and I know it is, but there are some things, and it gives you that chance to ask. And then share. So one of the things that I appreciated, and I'm going to keep picking on John, he's not here though, but one of the things he said that stuck with me is he would start with, instead of saying you are wrong, he would say, did you know? And he would share his story. And that was, we never saw this gentleman get defensive, right? Because we never attacked him, we never, said you're wrong. We said, did you know? And he said, no, I didn't know. It was about RBST. He said organic milk is the only milk that doesn't have RBST. That's what the newsletter said. John said, did you know that actually no milk has RBST? You can't, and he explained it. And the guy said, really? I didn't know that. It was a learning, it was a good engagement. So how are you going to share your story? That's the question, right? So what can you do? There's a lot of different things that people try, right? Try to get your story out there. What happens too often? Actually, and it happens in every area, but you hear more about the bad stories than you do the good stories. So how do you get the good stories out? Some people do farm tours or open houses, right? And I know right away I feel that chill again. People are, no, that is bad. That's risky. Okay, we'll talk about that. There is risk, right? You can do classroom visits. So, if there's, and I know this takes time too. So it's a matter of, do you have delegates or do you have representatives or somebody that can go in and help? Because what's good, you get those kids. So kids are impressionable, right? They don't have a lot of misconceptions quite yet, so you can kind of get them excited about dairy products and dairy production early on. And then what happens? They go home, they start talking to their parents, like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what we did today or what we saw today. And did you know that a calf, sees double for the first 6 weeks of life? I don't know if any of you knew that, but it's true. So then all of a sudden the parents are like, wow, they start to get different. They're starting to get this different perception, right? Social media, we kind of talked about that. And then there's the other media options where, trying to get those good stories out. What are the good things that you guys are doing? What can we share? What can we get out there that the public can read and say, wow, the dairy producers are doing good things, right? Instead of all this bad publicity. And then there's news, and then that hands-on personal experience. Now, June Dairy Month. Some of you have already heard this story of mine, but I want to share anyway, since we are coming up on my 1-year anniversary. When I first got here, it was the middle of June, and what is June? Well, the story, it's right there. Okay, it's Dairy Month, right? June Dairy Month, and I got here, and I said. Right away, I was all excited because now, I'm a dairy management specialist. I want to get on the farms. I want to meet people. The best way for me to do that is to go to a breakfast on the farm. Okay. And yeah, that's kind of the looks I got from everyone else too, is what are you talking about? And I described it. I was like, it's great. Like you know, I was explaining what you do. I said, there's farm tours and pancakes. Pancakes is crucial, right? You gotta have pancakes. But there's kids games and you get these firsthand experiences. It's wonderful. And they said, well, we don't do that. It's too risky, okay? Okay, that was my first culture shock, right? And I'm gonna show you what some of the other states are doing. And it's not, I'm not here to say this is what we should do. I'm here to say this is what other people are doing. I don't know if it would work here. I know it's risky. I don't know, but let's at least talk about it. And if we decide, yeah, we can't do it here, it's too risky, fine. But, you know, and there may not be any interest. But let's look at how other people are doing it and then see maybe what we can do. So these are, you know, examples. You know, we talk about these first-hand experiences. You know, I think that's one thing that, you know, people they lack, right, a lot. So if you don't give them the opportunity to get these kinds of experiences, what are you doing? They don't have any emotional attachment. We talked about emotions versus science-based knowledge, right? And if a lot of stuff is driven from emotions, why not give them some positive personal emotions to draw from, right? Now, Wisconsin, okay? 19 opportunities. Now, I hope you can appreciate these maps. I was sharing with Nicole earlier that they didn't have a map like this, so I had to go through and find every location and put a little dot on there. So, 19 different opportunities in June, okay? And this is their big thing. June Dairy Month. We are dairy producers. We're proud of it. Come look at what we have. Come look at what we're doing, okay? So these are all the places you can go in the month of June. That is an open house. You come to the farm. They have host farms. It's not like you're free to go on any farm you want. No. They have a host farm. And you have breakfast on the farm. Now who's involved? Well, the dairy producers, obviously, dairy producer groups, Extension, the Farm Bureau, all of those kind of come together to put this on, okay? So 19 opportunities. Minnesota, I was actually a little surprised. I was rooting for Wisconsin, but Minnesota had 20 opportunities. And these are all their locations where you can go on this day and you can get that first-hand experience, okay? You can go have breakfast. It's a nice, good publicity social-wise, right? You get, you know, your public is here, they're having breakfast together, they're engaging with each other, and who else are they engaging with? They're engaging with you, the dairy producer. Do they have very many opportunities to do that these days? Probably not. Iowa, they only have 7, right? But at least they have some, right? They've got some opportunities. There's some opportunities there. Now, right away, you know, some of the first things, you know, when I started to dig deeper, right? So why don't we do this here? What are some of the concerns? And some of them, you know, were obviously, you know, they made, you know, very common sense, right? But here's one thing. Here's the thing that I want to throw out there, okay? I feel that it's great that Wisconsin and Minnesota are doing these breakfasts. They have 19 or 20 different breakfasts in 1 month. That's great, right? We should be proud, right? We should make a big deal about Dairy Month. Why not, right? But when I look at Washington, I actually feel like some sort of good publicity or something like that is even more important here than it is here. And now people are trying to figure out where I'm going with this, right? But the rationale that I have is I feel that you guys have, the general public here has a greater disconnect from dairy production or animal production in general than the general public here, okay? So currently, well, as current as I could get at least, there's 10,860 dairies in Wisconsin, okay? Minnesota, 4,746, okay? Washington, the most current number, I think, what is it, around 450 was the last I heard, roughly? Yeah, okay. big differences in the number of dairies, right? What does that mean? I like to use this analogy. So you're in Milwaukee, poor you, but you're in Milwaukee, and you ask someone, just anyone, right? What are the odds that that person that you pulled out of Milwaukee either farms, knows someone who farms, or knows someone who farms? Well, if you've got 10,860 dairies, it's a pretty good chance, right? Okay, let's proceed to Minneapolis. I lived there. Beautiful place, but if you're there once again, I'm sorry, right? You're in Minneapolis. You pull someone off the street. Once again, what are the odds that they farm, they know someone who farms, or they know someone who farms? Well, with 4,746 dairies, you have a pretty good chance, right? We go to Seattle, okay? You pull someone off the street. What are the odds that that person farms, knows someone who farms, or knows someone who farms? Well, with 450 dairies, it's pretty tough, right? That's why I think your disconnect from the general public is even greater here than it is in these places. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but it's just, it's something that I picked up on. So we talk about this transparency, right? It's risky, it's scary, okay? What I'm trying to show you today is that it can be done. Now, you have limitations, you have, right? So, do you think that the host farm opens up the whole farm and says, public, go wherever you please? No. They try to limit, right? So, here are the places they block things off. I mean, there's safety risks, right? So, these are the areas you can go. Here are the things, you know, at least give them some sort of exposure, right? Now, in the Pacific Northwest, so if you have this greater disconnect, right, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. You have a greater disconnect from the dairy production, okay, the general public. Then on top of that, now you add the fact that they don't have any first-hand experience, okay? So, it's just the general public, and let's say in Wisconsin, I might get in trouble for doing this. Please don't tell me. Don't tell me either, video camera. But in Wisconsin, Minnesota, let's say you have 99% of good apples and 1% of bad apples, okay? The troublemakers, okay? Now, so you open your doors and you're worried about the troublemakers causing trouble, right? Maybe they're going to get some video footage and take it out of context and get you in trouble, and that's one of the fears, right? Okay, in Washington, let's say, and these, I have nothing to back up these numbers, okay? I'm just pulling them out of my hat. Let's say you have 75% of good apples. Those good apples are those people that say, I just want to know where my food comes from, and I just want to come experience this, okay? So you got 75% good apples and maybe 25% of bad apples. So you've got some more bad apples, right? More troublemakers that you're worried about. Now what happens if, what I hear is that, if at one time we had some open doors, right, and it was a little more transparent, okay, but then close the doors because why? It got too risky, right? Transparency, there's a risk factor. We're worried about those bad apples, okay? What happened to the 75% of good apples? Now that the doors are closed, they're looking at you saying, you must have closed your doors because you have something to hide, right? You're no longer allowing me to see this. Are still going to find a way to get on your farm if they want to? Unfortunately, probably yes. Okay. The reason I want to throw this out there is we've all seen these types of videos and these backlashes, right? The animal cruelty videos, the mercy for animals, all of that. We've all seen those videos, and we've all seen the consequences of it, right? But my question to you is, does this happen at an open house? Do they get this video footage from Breakfast on the Farm? No. If they want to get on your farm, they will. where does a lot of this video footage come from? They, become an employee, right? And a lot of it comes from. So we're afraid about these bad apples getting on the farm, but not doing this doesn't really help us in this case, right? So how do we proceed? I mean, what do we, I guess these are the questions that even if we don't discuss them, I know it's a scary topic and we don't, maybe we don't want to talk about it today, but at least leave here thinking about, could something like this ever happen in Washington? Could we get it to work? I don't know. I'm asking you guys, right? Because I'm still new. I haven't even been here a year, right? So what do I know? But I'm just saying, let's think about it. Maybe it could work, maybe not. What would be your main concerns about opening your doors to visitors, right? And I'm sure you can ramble off a whole list, right? And there's liability concerns, okay? And there's things, but yet I would say, okay, some of those concerns are, I know they're main concerns and they're problems, they're potential issues or consequences for you, but is there a way to work it out? How are they doing it in Wisconsin? How are they doing it in Minnesota? There's other states I didn't add, like New York and Ohio, that do it too. So what are they doing? We can get through those liability issues. And then what can WSU Extension do in order to help you engage with your community and maybe help you, what are some things that you need from us to help you be successful?